All right, the big story today in 49er land is the 49ers have found their replacement for D'Amico Ryan. So D'Amico Ryan's left for the Houston Texans as the defensive coordinator, and the Niners replaced him today by hiring the veteran coach Steve Wilks to be their new defensive coordinator. And Wilks makes a lot of sense. He's 53 years old. He's been a head coach. He's been a defensive coordinator. And he really checks a lot of the boxes for the 49ers. The Niners wanted to retain as many of their defensive coaches as possible. They like their defensive staff. They like their personnel, and their personnel fits their defensive scheme. So they really didn't want to change their defensive scheme. And I think that's the number one reason Vic Fangio didn't come here. Vic Fangio, you can say what you want about all these schemes being versatile, and they are. I mean, there's many NFL defenses that are hybrids of a 4-3 look. Sometimes it looks like a 3-4 look. Sometimes it looks like a 5-2 front with a five-man surface and a couple stacked backers. There's a bunch of different looks, but typically Vic Fangio has favored that 3-4 front as his base defense. And the Niners have gone with a 4-3 look as their base defense. So that wasn't really a fit. Steve Wilks is exactly what the doctor ordered. Why? Well, for a couple reasons. One, he believes strongly in a 4-3 defense. His 4-3 defense in Carolina was good enough to take them to the Super Bowl. It was a blitz-happy defense. He blitzes at a higher rate than D'Amico does typically. The Panthers had the second highest blitz rate in the NFL at 44% the year that they went to the Super Bowl against the Denver Broncos. Wilks runs a heavy zone scheme behind it as well. So if you're a defensive back that likes, playing zone or is good in zone, I think the 49ers are probably going to come calling. But really what's nice about Wilks is his single gap, defense is a 4-3 defense. And it's a 4-3, defense where he features penetrating type players on that front. And that's good news because the 49ers, when you think of, Kevin Givens and, really any number of their players, but I think of some of their interior players like Givens, T.Y. McGill. These guys shoot gaps. They're not two gappers. They're not in a 3-4 front, your typical 34 front, you need, a big nose man and two other base ends that are essentially like three tackles in the middle. And the 49ers don't really have that. I mean, outside of Javon Kinlaw, who you could probably argue it would be a pretty decent 3-4 lineman. The Niners don't have a 3-4 nose guard. Eric Armstead could play in a 3-4, but I think he's best used as a 4-3 defensive tackle at this point. But as far as the 49ers are concerned, they hire Wilks, and now they have continuity. They have continuity with their defensive scheme. They don't have to change out their coaches. They don't have to change out their personnel. They can keep Kocurek running that wide 9 front that he utilizes. And you've got a veteran in Wilks who's going to know how to coordinate the rest of the defense behind that front and who has a specialty. I mean, he was a defensive back at Appalachian State. He's outstanding at instructing, defensive backfield play. And so I would imagine that will be his point of emphasis. But what it really comes down to also is anytime you add a coordinator, there's always players that fit that may be coming along for the ride. And I'll give you two players that I think that are former Carolina Panthers that really fit Steve Wilks's his whole defensive strategy. One up front is Matthew Ioannidis, and I've been a huge fan of Ioannidis going back to his days at Temple. This guy's tough. I mean, he is really tough, and he can anchor inside. He can either be a 3-4 defensive end, he's scheme versatile, or he can play that interior spot in a 4-3. And what I love about Ioannidis is he's enormously strong at the point of attack. One of the things we saw against the Eagles is that Javon Kinlaw got bounced around a little bit against the run. Now the Eagles have a stellar offensive line. Jason Kelsey's going to Canton someday. He's that good of a player. So it's no real attack on Kinlaw. But Ioannidis, I think, will do what Kinlaw could not do, and that's play opposite Eric Armstead inside and hold the point of attack against the run. And I love even if Ioannidis was brought in to play in a rotation. I think in an ideal world, that's how you use Matthew Ioannidis. You use him inside in a rotation. He's 6'3", about 310 pounds. He's enormously strong. Coming out of Temple at the combine, he had 32 reps of 225. That's a terrific number. Really, he's got three traits that really stand out to me. The guy's got a motor that just doesn't stop. It revs high at all times. So he doesn't take any downs off, and he's constantly playing hard. Ioannidis doesn't have quick twitch. He's not a pass rusher. But what he does have is quickness. He gets his hands on the center and the guard before they get their hands on him. He's a technician with great quickness and a phenomenal motor. But what I also love about Ioannidis is he's a tough leader. And you can never have enough leaders on your defense. So much about defensive football is about accountability. And if you have no leadership, it shows. And if you have a defense it's chock full of guys that you would all consider leader type personalities, that's a benefit. So those are the traits I love about Ioannidis. 6'3", 310, great motor, great quickness, terrific leader. He's 29 going on 30. So, he's not one of these guys that has no gas left in the tank. I think Ioannidis could be a real solid player for the 49ers for the next 4 or 5 years. And he's the kind of guy that you could play him. He's a first and second down guy. He's coming off the field on third down, but that fits right into the way that Kocurek likes to utilize his players. If he had Chris Jones, he would leave him out there for 3 downs. But in this case, a guy like Ioannidis could really give them a first and second down plugger. And then if nothing else, if they keep Kinlaw, it will hold Kinlaw's feet to the fire. This year, at the end of the year, the 49ers had no choice. They had nobody outside of Javon who could really stand up inside, as a starter opposite Eric Armstead. I love Kerry Hyder. He's got a tremendous motor. He's got to play in a rotation. I love Givens, but you can move Givens in the run game. So I think in a lot of ways, Matthew Ioannidis is exactly the kind of piece that the 49ers need to add to their defensive line, and he should be relatively affordable. All right, option number 2, and this is one that's interesting. Corey Littleton with the Rams looked just like an absolute world beater. Corey Littleton with the Raiders was not the same player. Littleton played this last year for Carolina. He's 29. He moves exceptionally well. I mean, this is one of the best run and hit linebackers you're going to find in the league. And I think in this defense, he would be a perfect replacement if you cannot re-sign Azeez Al-Shaair. With D'Amico getting a head job in Houston, I think D'Amico is going to come knocking at Azeez's door in free agency. And I think it's really likely that Azeez gets an offer or two in free agency that far exceeds what the 49ers have budgeted to pay their third linebacker, a guy who sometimes is on the sidelines as you're going nickel and dime. So as much as I love Azeez and as much as I think Azeez is a future Pro Bowler, and I would absolutely prioritize re-signing him, he may get an offer that just prices him out of San Francisco. And then if that's the case, there's some good players in the draft that I really like that you could replace Azeez with. But Corey Littleton would be a phenomenal weak side backer. He can run, he can hit, he's versatile. He can play more than one linebacker spot. He's not old, an aggressive football player. You say, what is Littleton's downside? He's not the biggest guy. He's a lighter guy. He goes about 220, 225 pounds. But that absolutely fits into exactly the mold of the kind of linebackers that the 49ers are looking for. It's a speed game, and the Niners know it. And their linebacker speed is probably the best in all of football. Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Azeez Al-Shaair. These guys all run 4.5. Marcelino McCrary-Ball, 4.5. The guy that they picked up last year out of San Diego State, who was in camp with them this summer, Segun Alubi, ran 4.49. The trend is to have nothing but 4.5 linebackers who can defend sideline to sideline and are still tough enough and stout enough to shut down the run in their face between the tackles. on first or second down. And Littleton fits the bill. He loves to play. He can run for days. He's been relatively healthy. And I think in this defense with Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner, you're going to get absolutely A grade effort from Corey Littleton. And I think Littleton in this defense could be a difference maker, and he could be a nice replacement for Azeez Al-Shaair should Al-Shaair bolt in free agency. So there you go. Steve Wilks, the story of the day, is the new Niner defensive coordinator. And, Wilks is an interesting guy for a lot of reasons. They'll stay with their 4-3. They can stay with their coaching staff. They can stay with their personnel. They'll probably blitz a little bit more. He prefers a heavy zone scheme as far as coverage on the back end. And that's what the Niners prefer as well. So it's really a marriage between a guy who really fits exactly what the 49ers want to do. But now it shifts from, all right, you got the coaching hire to what additional players are you going to add to your front? And if the Niners came away in free agency with Corey Littleton and Matthew Ioannidis, it would not surprise me in the least.